Dear friends, today's subject on which he is asked to speak is power of prayer. Prayer presupposes a belief in the existence of God. Otherwise, we have nobody to pray to. So we take it for granted, even before we have seen God, before we have found our union with Him, that He does exist. This faith in His existence comes to us from the messages which we have received from saints and sages and other spiritual masters who have infused this faith into us by the teachings. Now, taking for granted that God exists, we have to next know where He is. There also the saints have taught us that God is dwelling within us. Heart is the seat in which it is found out that God is and He is dwelling within us. And we have to realize Him, find Him, and live in the light of His grace, light of His guidance. This is possible only by contacting God within us. That contact is possible only through prayer. Prayer is a means by which we communicate with Him and open up a relationship with Him. We look upon Him as Father, Mother, Friend, Master, or Lord. In any aspect we look upon Him and then consider ourselves to be His children, servants, or sons. This relationship brings us nearer to each other, and our prayer then becomes very, very real to us. When you look upon Him as Master and ourselves as servants, we pray to Him to give us the right guidance so that we can always walk on the path of righteousness and not go astray. God, who is dwelling within us, listens to our prayer, responds to it, and grants us the necessary strength to walk always on the path of truth. This power we derive by prayer. Prayer should be only done with the sole object of getting the knowledge of our union with Him. Knowledge is the word rightly used here because we are ever one with Him, but we do not know it. As we do not know it, we are like children missing the mother. Although the mother is in our presence, we may, by shutting our eyes, not feel her presence or see her. The moment we open our eyes, we see the mother before us. Not that she came newly to us, but she was there even before, but we had closed our eyes. So it is that we have closed our eyes to the existence of God within us. When we open our eyes, we know God is within us. He is not to come from outside and take a seat within us. He is already there, but we are unconscious of Him, not aware of Him. We have forgotten Him, and therefore feel we are separate from Him. This sense of separation, it is that makes us miserable, unhappy, bound, and in every way subject to fear, cares, worries, and anxieties. The moment we know that God is within us, and we are always basking in the sunshine of His grace, then we feel happy, just like the child which was missing the mother has found the mother. So prayer enables us to contact God and also to presence within us. Because as we go on remembering Him through prayer, our intensity to have Him increases and we feel His nearness as our mind becomes purer and purer day by day by means of the prayer and by means of continuous remembrance of Him. For Ramdas, during this time when he was struggling to know God, to realize God and feel His presence, there was one mainstay, that was God's holy and all-powerful name. Whenever he kept the name on his tongue, he felt that he was very near to God, because the name made him remember God continuously, and that remembrance developed into a consciousness in which he felt not only the nearness with God, but also oneness with Him. So the name leads us to Him without any doubt. Prayer and chanting of His name are the two things needed in order to find Him within ourselves and realize our unity with Him. Ramdas had not done anything else but these two things, prayer and repetition of God's name. Whatever else he did in the way of discipline, such as fasts, solitudes, society of saints, regulation of diet, all this came with the sole object, or done with the sole object of keeping up a continuous remembrance of God in the mind. All these disciplines are not done for their own sake, but with the sole object of constantly tuning the mind with God. Whenever God remembrance left him, he used to feel utterly miserable. When the remembrance was there, he was perfectly happy. It is then when the mind does not remember him that you feel restless and unhappy. This separation is unbearable. When you once found him, once you have contacted him and derived peace by that contact, a separation thereafter becomes unbearable. This is the experience of all devotees of God who are trying to remember Him and feel His presence always with them. In the early days of our struggle to approach Him, there is what they call touch and go. A tug of war, as it were, going within us. We find Him for a time and then we miss Him. When we miss Him, we are in a state of perfect agony. The agony of separation makes us intensely long for Him, pine for Him, and that pining and longing again brings us in contact with Him. It is said the feeling of the devotee who missed Him is like the feeling of a fish that has been taken out of water. How the fish thirsts for the water, so the devotee thirsts for God when he misses Him. When this state of things is with us, then it's easy for us to have a continuous remembrance of Him even in separation. That intense remembrance of Him make us conscious of His presence within us, and then we will have again a reunion. This is in Sanskrit called viraha. Viraha means agony of separation. We are living in the world and we are wishing that we should have God, but our desire to have God is so lukewarm that we do not feel the separation from Him. We are so much used to forgetfulness of Him that we does not consider that this is a kind of disease with us. This is a kind of life which is not the real life that we have to live. But when we pine for Him And when we pray to Him day and night to send His grace so that we can keep our mind ever in union with Him, in communion with Him, in constant remembrance of Him, then it is that we get what we want through prayer. Prayer should be done not with a view to get from God any material things. Ramdas remembers in this connection the famous teaching of Jesus Christ, seek first the kingdom of heaven and everything else will be added unto you. We are more concerned about the material things when we are praying to God than for the real thing, the union with Him and the realization of everlasting life. This is not that we want so many things that God gives us, which are after all perishable bubbles, which do not remain with us for all time, which we have to ultimately leave behind when we close this earthly career. So what we want is His grace, so that we can realize our oneness with Him, realize His presence with us, and our union with Him. This should be the sole purpose of our prayer to Him. In the Bhagavad Gita, you will find also an assurance given by God. The shloka, if Ramdas can repeat the shloka in Sanskrit to you and explain its meaning in English. Ananyas chintayanto mam ye janaha paryupasate tesham nityaviyuktanam yogakshemam vahamyam. Ramdas repeating the shloka because you would like to hear the Sanskrit shloka in its original, because Sanskrit is a language which may not be so familiar to you, but you will like to, Ramdas feels, hear him quote that shloka. The meaning of the shloka is, I bring full security and peace to that devotee of mine who keeps his mind ever in remembrance of me and keeps his soul in union with Him through meditation, through continuous remembrance. That means he who has made God the goal of his life and strives to attain Him and therefore remembers Him constantly, I look after him in every way. Ramdas's first year's life, as chronicled in Quest of God, was lived by wandering from place to place all over India in a state of complete surrender to God. He had no thought of the body, he had no thought of the food, he didn't know where he was to rest. His one thought only was of God. His tongue was continuously chanting God's name, and his mind was in a state of absorption in the divine, so to say. He was not feeling that he was separate from the divine, and the world for the time being disappeared from his mind. And in this state he wandered all over India, and God in a mysterious way looked after him. Therefore this very shloka, the meaning of which Ramdas had given you now, was printed on the first page of the book as the motto of the book. This assurance of God has been fully testified, fully proved to be true in that 1 year life of his, which was only at the start. And now, of course, it is evident every second of his life that God is looking after him most tenderly. He has come here all the way, maybe about 12,000 miles from India, but all through his journey he was looked after so tenderly. When he started from there, many people had the misgivings that he would have to go through many difficulties and discomforts and so many troubles on the way, but nothing of the kind. God arranged everything so beautifully that he had not to suffer anyway due to this long trouble. So it is not proper for us to ask God for any material things, only for things of highest value, that is the realization of Him. To see Him, feel Him, have His contact and companionship always. That can be possible only when we find Him within ourselves as the all-pervading universal truth. When you tune yourself with Him, become one with Him as universal truth, then you will never miss Him. You will have His presence always with you. At every point there is a contact of Him for you. Wherever you see, it is He. Whatever you feel, it is Him that you feel. In all manner of ways you will have contact with Him. And this comes through the realization of God within us as the immortal, changeless, all-pervading truth. And this is attained through prayer done with no selfish motive in it, not with a desire to get anything from Him except that everlasting state in which we feel our oneness with Him. Health, wealth, and so many things of the world, these things come and go. Even this body is not permanent. So to pray for anything perishable is not the correct way. When God can grant us immortality, why should we ask Him things that are mortal, which are changing, which are impermanent? God says, whatever I give you for your prayer is not permanent. If you ask me that I should be yours, I can be yours. I alone am immortal. So if you want me, I can become yours. But you do not want me, you want things from me. And these things are perishable. And those things cannot give you real peace because they are changing and they are perishable. Changing and perishable things cannot give you real and permanent happiness, permanent peace, permanent joy. And so ask Him to be yours, or make you His. It comes to the same thing. That means you ask for immortality. In immortality there is real joy and peace. There is a prayer among the Hindus, lead me, O God, from the unreal to the real, lead me from darkness to light, lead me from death to immortality. This should be our prayer to Him and nothing more or nothing less than this. Then we will come by the highest beatitude in which we will enjoy supreme bliss and peace here and hereafter. Perhaps this will do. There are only 15 minutes more. If there are any questions to be answered, kindly hand over the slips in which you have written them.
I have some paper here if anyone would like.
What does spirituality mean? That is the question. That which relates to the spirit and the experience of the spirit is spirituality. Because spirit and matter are two different things. Our body is material and the spirit dwelling in this body is spiritual. So whatever relates to this spirit within us is spiritual. We must think, feel and realize that we are not merely bodies, but we are the immortal spirit. Many people go with the impression that they are only the visible appearance, that is, a body made up of the five elements. It's not so. There is a spirit within us. It is that spirit that makes us walk, talk and do everything. Now, for instance, people think when they give and receive with the hands that they are doing these movements and these actions themselves, as if they have got an independent power to do these things. There are so many movements, changes that are going on within the body, such as the action of the digestive organs within it, the blood circulation, the growing of the hair. We cannot say these things are done by me. Can we say, I am doing these things? Who is responsible for these movements within us? The same power which is responsible for these inner movements is responsible also for our outer movements. You see the wind blow, the sun giving light, the trees grow, and the birds sing on the trees. So many movements, changes are going on round about us. They are not separate movements caused by any power individual in them working accidentally or by chance, or as they say, due to the concourse of atoms or some such thing. They explain away in order to deny the existence of a spiritual power that permeates the entire universe and is responsible for all movements and changes in it. That all-pervading power it is that makes us act, talk, do everything. If we recognize this universal power and know that that power is responsible for what we do, then our ego will disappear and will be one with universal life and universal truth, and be supremely happy and free. So long as this ego is in us, which makes us feel that we are doing everything by ourselves, we are caught in a trap and we can never be happy. So we have been asked to resign ourselves to the will of God. Will is nothing but the power of God active in nature, active in ourselves. By surrendering ourselves to the divine power or will, we release within us that supreme bliss and peace which is locked up through the assertion of the ego, assertion of the individual will, the so-called. People have asked him often, what about the free will? And how does it stand in relation to the divine will? Really, there is no free will. That is only divine will working everywhere. It's a mistake to think we have got any power to do anything. In the Bhagavad Gita, there is a sloka in which God says, it is my will and power that prevails in the entire world. I move this world wheel myself, causing all movements in it, all changes in it. And so he is at the inception, at the growth of things, and at the destruction of things. It's one power that does all these things in the universe. And if we submit to that power and know that that power is active in us, then we will be free from the ego. And that moment we realize that we are the unchanging, immortal, all-pervading, spiritual, universal truth and spirit. To know that we are that spirit is to live in God, and this is spirituality. Could you please tell me about the God realization and union with God that stands so strongest in our mind? God realization is to become God Himself. When you have realized that you are the universal truth, then you become the expression of that universal truth. You become the embodiment of that truth. So the great spiritual masters who came to teach mankind the path that leads to God realization were concrete expressions of God. They are not only in union with God, they are verily gods walking on the earth. Because their ego has completely disappeared, and God's power, wisdom, light, love and joy are revealed in them. Their contact enlightens, elevates and redeems the soul, caught in the toils of this worldly life, hungering and thirsting for worldly things. Such a soul gets its redemption or release from the bondage in which it lives by contact of a God-realized soul. God-realized means a God-man or God Himself in human form. Ramdas can tell you that during the early days when he was walking on this path, he had contacted great saints and sages who he looked upon as the very embodiments of divinity, because he could clearly feel in the presence they are not ordinary human beings. They have not only seen and realized God, but they are verily God Himself in those forms. Many people do not accept this truth. They are only for the impersonal aspect of God. But impersonal aspect of God cannot have anything to do with us. You cannot receive any grace from the impersonal. You can get grace, you can get real help from those who have realized the impersonal. Those personal expressions of the impersonal, they are the saints and sages and spiritual masters. Their contact is essential. It is they that awaken in us the longing for God, and then guide us on the path until we realize Him. If you cry to the heavens or appeal and pray to that unmanifest, all-pervading universal truth, you don't get any response. The response comes from the saints and masters, because they are the expressions of God come down to redeem humanity from sin and ignorance. And so their contact is essential. And even if you pray to that impersonal truth, He contacts you only by revealing Himself in saintly, purified and enlightened souls. So God realization means to become God Himself. That is how Ramdas feels, and he knows that at one stage of his sadhana or discipline, God told him that you were at one time a servant of mine, but now I can tell you definitely you and I are one. Because of the oneness with impersonal, he is given as the personal and impersonal. Because of the oneness with impersonal, he is given the sight to see him everywhere, as everybody and everything. So in the active life which he is living, he does not feel the sense of separation from him. In the depths of a being, of course, in the impersonal, there is no difference between him and that spirit. But even in the active life, he sees everywhere God Himself manifest. That impersonal manifested the entire universe of name and form and movement. As in the Bhagavad Gita you will find in the 11th chapter, the Lord has shown to Arjuna, his disciple, His universal form. And Arjuna says, "O God, I behold you everywhere, inside, outside, up, down, in all directions I see none but you. All forms are thine." This sudden vision that came to him unsettled his brains and he became frightened. He said, "Oh God, I cannot stand this vision." Because it came too suddenly to him, perhaps he could not, but we have to achieve it. And we gradually get into that state when we are granted this vision, then the heights of joy to which we reach are simply indescribable. It is after seeing God everywhere, still you live in the world as an instrument, as a child, as a servant, as a devotee of God. Surrendering up yourself entirely to that Divine Master, knowing fully well by His power you are doing everything. This is a state of surrender that comes last. People will say after you have become one with God was a question of surrender, but there is a state of surrender. Because you do not wish to remain always one with Him. You, in the impersonal sense, you are always with Him, but in the personal, the visible aspect, you maintain a kind or a sense of separation from Him, in which you open a relationship with Him. He has mastered yourself as servant. But thing is, you never miss Him. That is one thing, because the inner realization is there, which does not allow you to miss Him. Inner realization of one with Him in the impersonal. So you talk to Him, you walk with Him, you feel His presence always with you, as your personal master, friend, mother, God. God is a term which does not apply only to the impersonal. God is a term applied to that supreme being who is at once impersonal and personal. With such a God it is that you contact even after you have attained the highest realization of both the impersonal and personal. Being God yourself, you become His servant. That's the beauty of the relationship. You are God and still you are His servant. You are His child. Jesus' words, you see, have got the greatest significance here. When He said, "I and my Father are one," still He called Himself the Son of the Father. And when the question arose, how he could show to his disciples God whom he has seen, with whom he has communed, and from whom he has been sent down to this earth for the uplift of humanity. He replied to the disciples, he who sees the Son sees the Father. Father here is the impersonal, omnipresent Spirit, and Son is that Spirit born in flesh and blood in the world as Jesus, for guiding humanity on the path that leads to everlasting life. So personal and impersonal. Personal is Jesus, who had the knowledge of the impersonal, and personal by itself is the all-pervading omnipresent Spirit in which we have to absorb ourselves, dissolve ourselves, dear self, and realize. And then we will be raised to the same stature of as Jesus. We have to become one with the Father before we can truly be the Son of that Father. Son means an expression, embodiment. So this is a right given to every human being. The right of rising to the stature, to the experience and the height to which this great spiritual master had reached, and in which they lived, moved and had their being. Because universal truth is open to everybody. So it behoves us to realize that all-pervading universal truth, first by dissolving our ego, by constant remembrance of the divine, and surrendering ourselves entirely to Him, by which process you dissolve the ego sense, and the ego sense disappears. That instant you know that you are the universal Spirit. For this it is these great sages and saints and spiritual martyrs come here to help us. Their guidance and help is essential. The Son takes us to the Father. The spiritual masters, he takes us to that impersonal, all-pervading, static, calm, silent, immortal Spirit, which is our real being, real existence, of which we are ignorant. It's not that we have become that, we are that, but we have forgotten. But this forgetfulness is removed by the grace of saints who have come to take us to that impersonal reality and make us realize that we are, and that reality are one. God. After having once experienced yes, after having once experienced God, why does one soul? And this is true in the case of all spiritual aspirants, all devotees of God. Here, what we need is grace to keep us always aloft, keep us above the dark waters of this world in which we are drowning every moment. God's grace alone can keep us above the temptations of the world. It's the temptations that drag us down, you see, and we meet with the dark night of the soul. Man is controlled by three qualities. Because his nature is made of three qualities. until his nature is illumined with the divine light, power and joy, that nature is trying to keep us down in a lower level, not allowing us to rise to that spiritual height. They are in Sanskrit called Sattva, Raja and Tama. Sattva is a quality of harmony, Raja is a quality of restlessness, and Tama is a quality of torpor, laziness. When we are seized with this quality, we are unable to remember God. Our mind runs away whenever we sit for meditation or for prayer, because we are under the control of this quality. There is depression, despondency in the mind. That's the dark night of the soul. When the mind rises to, say, Rajoguna, mind is restless, but it is not in a state of darkness. There are glimpses of light coming now and again, but there is restlessness in the mind. When you rise to Sattva-guna, this group, that quality of harmony, your mind is steady, and you can meditate, you can remember God, your prayer seems to be fruitful, you feel the contact in a way of God, but that quality is not permanent in you, it's overlapped, overpowered by the lower, and at once you lose it. So we are subject to these two qualities so long as we are living in the lower levels of consciousness. It is our struggle to rise above all the three qualities and get established in that Supreme Spirit within us. When we are once established there, then we never fall down again and become subject to the attacks of these three qualities in us. They belonging to our lower nature. So here what is needed is the contact of a saint, a grace of a saint. God pours His grace on us through the saints. When His grace comes to us and lifts us once for all from the three qualities of nature, we get established in that universal truth, universal spirit, which is our real being. Thereafter there will be no fall. Our union or oneness within is complete, and there is no break from that state. Till then there is going upward and going downward. These lower two qualities of restlessness and then the darkness, they drag us down from time to time. Our mind is restless, distracted, agitated, and with that time we cannot do anything. If we sit for prayer, we have no peace. If we struggle to remember God, we cannot do it. There is despondency, darkness, and misery, pain, felt through the separation from the Lord. At that time, the best way to lift the mind is contact of a great spiritual, illumined soul. And if you desire to have one of that supreme attainment, you can have it, provided you really aspire for that state back. In some way, a good soul comes into your contact, and at once your mind is relieved from the burden of those two low, down pulling qualities, and at once your mind is lifted up and is filled with the light, harmony and peace. Or if you haven't got any such contact, and if there is no possibility of having such contact, then humble yourself before God. Feel that you are nothing, lower than the dust, lower than a blade of grass. And then pray to Him, "Oh God, take me back to You again. Raise me from this love of despondency, from this darkness, and raise me to Yourself." Cry to Him just like Christ to the Mother. Then by His grace, directly flowing from your heart, you will at once be raised, and you will lose that, gain back that contact which you had lost for time being. In what sense are Christ, Krishna, Buddha, God, and in what sense are they men? So far Ramdas belief goes, and that belief is founded on deep spiritual experience. He looks upon Christ, Krishna, God are the very embodiments of God. No, Christ, Krishna, Buddha are the very embodiments of God. In what sense are they men? They appeared only as men. But they were not really men. God had assumed human form for us, for our sake. They were not men, but they looked like men. If they are mere men, we cannot get anything from them. But we did get so many things from them. It's not from men we got, from God we got. If we look upon them as men, there is no meaning in our having faith in them, taking their name, or praying to them. They are not men. Millions and millions worship these three great spiritual masters of the world and have derived incalculable benefit. They have been raised, elevated, illumined, and made utterly divine. Such grace, such light, and such power coming from them cannot be taken as coming from mere human beings or mere men. They are God's very molds. Like God had poured himself into them. And the mold also is He. Mold does not remain human, it's fully saturated with divine radiance, peace and joy. And they are simply giving out love and joy to everybody who came in contact with them. This is not possible for a human being. Thousands and thousands used to go to them and then derive benefit. They could not look upon them as mere men, they were radiant beings. There was a halo of light around them, and the love for humanity was so wonderful. Nobody was left out from the vast, all-embracing love which they poured upon humanity. These are not mere men. We see men, compared to them, what a vast difference. As much difference as between night and day, between a glowworm and the sun. It's 9:15. What's the time allotted for the start?
We started about 8:15.
Bhavan?
We started at 8:15.
8:15.
Do we have a few minutes of silence?
Yes, we will have a few minutes commune with that divine within us. Surrender ourselves to Him, pray to Him to guide us.